All right, so, can you guys hear me okay?
I can.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we want to talk in a minute here with George about an overview on the financing. So just a couple of quick caveats. One is this is just for information. It's to try to answer any questions we can about this structure of this. This is a very complex financing, unfortunately. George will talk about the three main sections or components, parts of this, that being the Red Wing portion of the financing, the Second Street Sewer Project, and then the business park. Each one of these
Okay.
even though this is one bond issue, each one of these is a separate component with a separate kind of term and repayment and that kind of stuff. So, George will walk through that. The summary pages that were sent with the packet are the best way to go with this right now, to kind of go off of those. We also sent you the actual debt, the amortization breakdown that shows the annual payments. We're not going to get into that as much today, I don't think, unless you guys have specific questions, because that is going to change a little bit. If the bond is authorized at the March council meeting to be sold, it'll be basically effective interest rate at whatever point after that we're locked in. So there's probably going to be some minor changes to the numbers. But basically, the thing I want to emphasize is the Red Wing project is very much the same as what we talked about last July, so that there won't be an increase to the levy for that. There will be parts of that will come out of the sewer water fund and the storm water fund, and then assessments. So there's basically four streams there: the three utility funds, the levy, and then the assessments. The Second Street, that sewer lending project, will just come out of the sewer utility fund. And then now the big change that we've come up with, there are numerous kind of go-arounds looking at different financing structures, is now we've taken in the business part of this, the sewer, water, and storm sewer parts of that project will all we're proposing would be repaid out of those utility funds, which is going to require a one-time increase, which is going to range, and you should have that. I'll get into that when George is done. I'll talk more specifically about that, but that's going to result in, I think, a lot lower debt levy impact from maybe what would have been 130,000 to maybe 45,000. And so that's going to help quite a bit with the tax structure in the next couple of years. And the utility increase to the utility rates we'll talk about, but actually when you see that, it won't be, I don't think, too bad considering how big of a project we're talking about. So George, if you want to talk about, just talk about the three components of that, go ahead.
And George, before you start, if you want to let me know which page, of this packet, I can share that with everyone too. So I'll just take direction from you.
Sure. Maybe going back to Red Wing, Derek. So thank you for your time, council members, and certainly let me know if you have any questions along the way. When I attended a meeting, I can't even remember the exact date here, but when the council selected this option for Red Wing, is there a way, Derek, to make that a little larger on the screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Zoom in, just scroll down as you go.
Yep. So at the time, this is the structure that the council favored. It was a 20-year financing term, and then 15 years for the special assessments, which is consistent, I believe, with previous street projects that the city has done in the past. And as Mark alluded to, we've got several funding sources to help pay back the debt. First of all, up top, you can see that, and we talked about this at length at one council meeting rather, the stormwater contribution of $229,000 helping to downsize the overall bonding amount. What we've got is still interest rates are favorable in the current bond market. As Mark alluded to, we wouldn't be selling bonds until the month of June. So again, we hope that interest rates hold and that we've got favorable rates at that time. Based upon the schedule that's in front of you, we've got an average interest rate. So the weighted average interest rate over the 20-year term of a 2.39%. And so certainly if we're in that range, that's a very strong rate, very good rate. Working our way down the page, Derek, we've got utility revenues coming in to pay their respective share of the project. Water utility, as you can see, has got the highest percentage there at 20%. And so that's just 20% of the debt service that you see above. So that 105% debt service figure of $262,000, the percentages and the amounts are driven off of that number. So utility revenues, the assessment revenue, that's, figures from Bolton and Mink. And then the balance is what's needed for, the balance is the tax levy pays the balance. And as we've talked about before, the 2007 bonds, you're at a point now where those are retired, but we're continuing that levy. And so you've got an $87,000 levy, and we've got, or rather not continuing that levy, but you would continue it at the $86,100 or whatever figure that ends up being. So it ends up being as net zero levy in this perspective. We're hoping that continues. So that's, briefly, Council, that's the Red Wing project. Again, financed 20 years, 15 years on the assessments. Like I talked about before, it's efficient if we've got, the city of Kenyon doesn't come to the bond market that often. So, and we've got 3 projects in a relatively close proximity to each other in terms of a timeline. So that's where we talked about trying to put together the most efficient, cost-effective financing for the city and package all 3 of these projects into one financing. Like Mark alluded to, a lot of numbers being run, a lot of moving numbers. But nonetheless, I think we as, your staff has been doing a great job of, evaluating what's the right fit for the city here. So, Derek, to move ahead maybe to the
Next page.
Second Street sewer then. Any questions on Red Wing, Council?
No.
Second Street sewer. Let's see which page.
I don't know what.
Okay, here it is.
Oh, there it is, right there.
Yep.
I'm not sure what that correlates to, council members, in terms of page in your packet, but always look at the top box at the header at the top of the page. So this is that Second Street sewer project that Mark alluded to. Project's been done, and so what the city did is passed a resolution allowing yourselves to replenish yourself or pay yourself back with future bond proceeds. And so that's what you're doing here. You've got a $250,000 amount that you're planning to pay yourself back. And so here on this page, you see a 10-year option and a 15-year option is the only difference. Working with your staff, we've kind of, if I can say, Mark, the recommendation from myself and your staff is that we look at the 15-year option. It's kind of what we thought was the best fit, keeping that debt service a little bit lower, and yet the interest rate is still, quite favorable. So now this would be paid back 100% by sewer rates. So, $21,000 approximately per year to pay back these bonds. Again, just rolled in because each of these individual components can be issued separately as general obligation bonds. Because they're general obligation, they can be packaged together. And And again, so that's the intent, is to issue one large general obligation bond. Any questions on the Second Street Sewer project?
No,
No.
not for me.
Okay, yeah, that one is the most straightforward project of them all. And now moving on to the business park, and this one, as Mark alluded to, we've got, it changed fundamentally the payback over the last couple of days, actually. Previously, we were running numbers with the levy being the sole revenue source to pay back the debt. If there wasn't any lot sale revenue or other sources of revenue generated from lots within the district. So, but now the methodology changed to incorporating the utility revenues to pay. It's a little bit more than 60% of the annual debt. If you look at the middle of the page there, water, sewer, and storm, Bolton and Mink put together, breaking out how much of the applicable cost relates to each of those respective utilities. And so we've got debt service that is tied to those percentages. And then the balance is again the levy. The first column, just so you know it, I know it, the shading kind of covered some of the wording there, but scenario 1 is the base project. And scenario 2, there's an alternate, I believe, for a turn lane. Is that right, Derek?
Yeah, so I can provide a little bit of background with this. If you remember from our I believe it was from the last council meeting, the regular council meeting, which was last week. One of the things that we had briefly touched on was that we were running the final cost estimates for that project as we're buttoning up the plans for that. And the total project cost was coming in a little bit, or what we were estimating to be the total project cost was coming in a little bit higher than what we had previously discussed. So over this past week or two here, we've been looking at options to bring that down. We'll be getting into more details on those options first at the upcoming EDA meeting on the 28th, and then after the EDA provides direction on what they want included in this project, then we'll bring that back for discussion at a future, I believe, special council meeting, possibly at the end of this month or at the beginning of May. But just kind of in summary on what's going on here, this base project basically includes the entire project that we had talked about before. It's the new development of 4 new lots, the storm sewer, the utility extensions for the sanitary and water main out to the north of the site. The only thing that we pulled out of that project cost is this alternate scenario that George was talking about. So that alternate would be up to this point, we've talked about that right turn lane off of County Road 12 being included as part of this project. We've spoken with the county, and if we run into a scenario where we get bid numbers that are a little bit higher than what we're projecting here right now, that turn lane could be removed from the project for the time being and built at a later date when the traffic volumes fully justify and warrant that turn lane to go in. So basically that turn lane will be treated as an alternate right now. I believe for the purposes of this financing discussion, we're going off of just this base project estimate. So that's
Okay, and
pretty much that base project is probably the one to pay the most attention to in terms of what's on George's spreadsheet here.
that's why the alternate is higher than the base because of the
Yeah.
right turn lane.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
Because the
got
alternate includes the right turn lane, which is another $45,000, something like that.
Derek,
Yeah,
is the county going to help pay for that turn lane?
No,
No,
they haven't offered to.
Well, they can. I mean,
Yeah.
well, I mean, really, they should. You know, they're getting that sales tax revenue that's come in far more than they expected. You know, we should put Isaacson and Nessa on the hot seat for that one. They should help pay for that.
That,
Sounds good to me.
We can ask them, yeah. I mean, we can pursue that.
the only thing I would preface it with newer developments, you know, a lot of times it would be odd, you know, for a private developer if they wanted to do this same project to require a government entity to put in a right turn lane for, you know, a new road that they are proposing. So like I said, I mean, check with them.
Well, and the thing is, if we don't do it, you know, when this is put in, our plan is, I mean, when a building, when it's developed, the first development building comes in there, that's when we would look at it. That may be a year out. I mean, we don't know. But regardless, we can pursue it, and maybe we should try to work through the county EDA. Because this is an economic development project, obviously it's going to benefit the entire county. That's the argument I would always make. So,
Yeah, I would, just speaking from experience, I would definitely pursue that. I think they've got pockets of money there that can help.
okay.
And isn't it also a safety issue?
Well, yeah, eventually it's going to go, I mean, it is going to go in and sure, you know, regardless of whether it goes in now or when the first development occurs in that park, in that area, that turn lane's going to have to go in.
Yes,
So-
but it's cheaper to do it when we're doing the whole project, isn't it? Rather than get the project done and then come back and do it later?
That's a really good point, Richard. Yes, that's absolutely correct. If you did do it now, the cost that you would pay for that turn lane would be cheaper than if you did it as a standalone project later on. So,
Yes. So if the county were to help, then they are getting more for their money if they do it now instead of waiting. Because the cost is less.
Okay. Yep, all right, we'll pursue that as best we can, and, yeah, that sounds good.
Derek, this is Joe.
sure.
The chart that we're looking at on the screen right now, a couple of the key numbers are almost can't be read because of the shading, the annual debt service and the new levy required. Do you have the version that you shared with me and when we emailed today?
Yeah, so I can see if I can pull this up here.
If
quick.
you've got that, it'd be a lot easier for the council to see. Those are a couple of the key numbers that
Sure.
they're going to want to see.
Yeah.
I'm not hiding those on purpose, Joe.
No, I think it's just, there it is.
Here's
That's much
another
better.
version of it. Can anyone see that? Everyone see that? Okay.
Thank you. Good comment. And again, group, I just want to, I should have given a little more description on the top of the page there. And this is just a refresher for everybody. You've heard these numbers a lot, but you've got a total project amount of 2.15 million, adding in costs of issuing debt, and then subtracting the grant amount. The grant from the state of Minnesota brings you to 1.52 million. So that's the,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, was there a question?
No, sorry.
No, I'm just
Got
agreeing.
disconnected.
Okay, I can see that. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And like was referenced earlier with, Mark indicated that previously this was just levy. And if you look at the shaded number towards the top, 105% statutory debt service, 126,000. That would have been, the previous version of this bond would have been just levy and just with a levy of, you know, in the vicinity of 100 to 120,000. And so what we did is we structured the bonds with a ramp up, if you will, with low payments in the beginning and low for, you know, just kind of gradually climbing debt service until the 20th year, because we were trying to keep the levy, you know, kind of a lid on the levy to manage that. Now that there's 60 to 65% of the revenue coming in from utility revenues, that really drives down that tax impact. In this case, down to about $40,000. I would actually anticipate once we restructure this one more time, Mark and I had talked about, actually instead of having that slow ramp up, now with utility revenues, we can have near level debt service from the beginning, so that you're retiring more principal earlier and paying a lot less interest over time. So that $41,000 in tax impact should actually be reduced down to, say, $35,000 or so. So that's a change there, Council, that's not reflected in front of you tonight. But again, we'll work towards that that possible reduction of the levy and structuring the debt more efficiently. So, any questions on that? Again, getting that utility revenue into the revenue equation really helps this financing a lot. But this
I
one,
think
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
with the email I got, I think all the pertinent figures are in black, so I can't see what you're talking about.
Yeah, mine too. But I
Uh,
can see the screen what you're showing there.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
what
do
is
I
on the-
just take your word for it, or do I rely on all the other council members to see it on the screen and not make any comment?
I'm seeing it, Richard.
Okay, great.
Well, like Richard, which numbers can't you see? Any of them, or just the total?
He can't, so what he is seeing.
The grayed out boxes.
Okay, because we can
Yeah.
see what those are.
All of those are black for me.
Okay.
So it looks just like you've had a big bold
Sure.
at the top and the bottom of the three graphs.
So what George was just kind of going over, yeah. So what George was just going over, that last number, which is really, I think probably the one that's important, is that there's a row for net new levy required. It's kind of towards the middle of the page. Do you see that?
I can see the water utility revenue, sanitary sewer, storm sewer. Above that, there's a big bold black box.
Yep. So
Is that where you're talking about that I should be seeing a pertinent number?
yeah, so just below where it talks about the utility revenues, there's a bold black box, and then you'll see a row that's called net new levy required. Do you see that one?
No.
It will be.
It's in the middle.
I've got
of the
enough.
It's in the middle of the page.
Richard, you see the storm sewer utility revenue? You saw that one.
Storm sewer, sanitary sewer, water utility, and then above that, there's a big black box.
Okay, go
And then
down.
above that box, there's another big black box.
No, go.
Okay.
If you see
Go
the
the other
water, the sanitary, and the storm, keep going down the page.
There's a big black box next.
Yep.
And
And
then the first thing I can see is net new levy required.
Yes.
And there's a black box to the right of that.
Yeah.
Yep,
So,
we'll give you those numbers.
so the black box
Okay.
to the right, the black box to the right of that net new levy required.
Yes.
What's in that spreadsheet that you can't see is a number that's $41,170.
Ah, okay.
So that's the net new levy required with this current scenario that George has put together. And what he was just going over is some of these numbers actually may change a little bit with the final revision, if I'm explaining this correctly, George, that number may go down closer to 35,000.
Right. No, good questions all around. And I apologize about the shading here. Like you noted, the top shaded number, 126,000. That's the debt service. The middle of the page shows utility revenues totaling about 85,000.
Yeah.
And then the levy impact below is what's left over. And And like I noted earlier, the nice thing about the way this is structured now is that levy impact without the utility revenues certainly would have been a lot higher. So north of $100,000 per year. So it's a nice development bringing in utility revenues. Of course, you have to pay for those, your utility customers, but what it's doing is driving down that tax impact. So,
And how did we come up with the utility revenue coming in? Or was it just said, well, the utility company can handle it, they can afford it, they got money sitting there, our revenues handle that, or what?
I'm gonna talk about that, Richard, after we're done talking about the,
Okay.
and you should have, when I talk about this, you should have a breakdown of
Sorry.
the increase is gonna be to the utility funds. And basically what we
Okay.
did is we ran scenarios and we took the additional cost and we added it to and we tried to project out what kind of increase would be needed to get to that point. So that's what I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
So council, in summary then, the financing consists of the Red Wing project financed over 20 years, the sewer lining project financed over 15 years, and the business park rolled in there as well, financed over 20 years. And Derek, can you correct me if I'm wrong? The timing of the bids on the business park.
So what's currently proposed here, as I had mentioned, we've got that EDA meeting on the 28th. We'll be discussing with the EDA these final plan revisions that we've been discussing internally here. Get approval with that, and then shortly thereafter, we would hold another special council meeting to approve those plans and authorize us to bid the project. So basically, the project would be advertised for bids over the month of May, and the bid opening would be held near the end of May and be ready for award at the June regular council meeting.
Thank you, Derek. With that said, the preliminary timeline is to still issue bonds in the month of June, but not at that June 9th city council meeting, simply because we wouldn't, the main action for that evening will be to award the construction bids on the business park. And then we would have scheduled that bond sale for later in the month of June. So that the next step, City Council, is on May 12th, your next regular City Council meeting, we would have a resolution for you that calls for a bond sale. So the purpose of that resolution is, not to lock in the principal amount, not to lock in the structure. Generally, you would have that known at that time, but sometimes like this, you don't have all the construction bids in. But the most important part is to set a sale date. And so I'll work with Mark on that. Tentatively, we were talking about June 23rd, potentially holding a special city council meeting to award the financing. Like Derek said, get those construction bids end of May, then we can resize the bonds. And then we'll be working with your city staff on getting a bond rating in place, et cetera. And then have that well in advance of June 23rd. So that's the tentative timeline. It just wouldn't be ready to have a bonds or have the financing done on your June regular meeting. Simply, we have to allow a certain amount of time to adjust the bond size after the construction bids come in on the business park. So that's why the end of June works better on that timeline. Just be another special meeting for you folks, but and it'd be nice if we were all in person, but any questions on that? I do plan on, when we have the May 12th meeting, that I would go through that resolution, go through the updated structure and timeline. So from the financing perspective, that's the next steps.
Okay, just so I have it clear in my mind, the Red Wing project, there will be no new net levy because of the expiring bonds equaling the new bonds. The Second Street project will be paid out of sanitary sewer, so the only one affecting the levy would be the business park.
Yep.
Well stated, yes.
Okay,
That's how I understood it too.
Hey, George, what was that tentative sale date again? June what, did you say? 23rd?
23rd.
Yes, tentative the 23rd. And council, if that date doesn't work, we'd have flexibility to move back later in June or into July, but not really forward. It just with the proximity of when the business park bids are in. So we just have to be able to modify the bond documents and, in a reasonable amount of time before you sell the debt.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I'm satisfied.
I'm good.
So am I.
George, this is Joe. I've got one question I just wanted to throw out. Obviously, when the city develops the business park, they're going to have lots that are available for sale. And, if they're successful in selling those lots, they'll get money coming in from the sale of those lots. Is that accounted for anywhere in your numbers, or is that just, or not?
It's not really figured in there because we haven't determined assessments or the sale. I mean, the city bought that, the EDA bought that property several years ago, and I think we're not as, I don't think, concerned about getting our sale part of that back. I think it's more to try to cover the development costs as much as we can. And we're also going to set up a TIF, tax increment district, try to capture that money. That would probably go right to the bond. So, if all things being equal, within a couple of years or 3-4 years, if we can get, by the time something pays taxes, because there's always a year delay, if we can get some revenue coming through a tax increment, that'll help over that $40,000.
And that was my point, is that $41,000 levy right now you're seeing is essentially a worst case scenario because it doesn't account for any revenue that the city's going to get from the sale of the lots at this point.
Yep, that's correct. Yep,
So
Good
it can
question.
only get better.
yes.
Yes, good point.
Yeah, and that's what's kind of good about this, plus the fact the state's paying half of the cost.
Yeah. And then, Mark, was there an outstanding question then, I think from Richard, about the utility revenues that you were
Yeah,
gonna?
I'm going to talk about now. If we're
Okay.
done, if there's no other questions on the bond part of it. So, okay, so then I will talk real briefly here about the projections and how we've, Sue has gone back through and looked at the utility cost portions of the project and then tried to see what would happen to the sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and water funds if we had to increase rates to generate those. And what she came up with was, and you should have about 3 or 4 spreadsheets in the information I sent out. This one that I sent out this afternoon.
Okay.
Yep, and Derek's going to put that up right now on the screen. So I'll start with this, and then I'll talk about what this does to the rates. Because these numbers look a little high especially the stormwater. But there's the increase that we project, which would start in 21 for these three funds would be as follows: 13% increase for sanitary sewer, 40% increase for storm sewer fund, and 40% increase for the water fund. Now, Stu's projections show that if the city pays all the eligible utility costs from, and remember with the Red Wing project, we've already figured this. So we already figured they added an increase for that this year, so that's not counted in this. But for the business park and the Second Street project, what would happen is that with these increases, we feel that the sewer fund will begin to show a larger net increase by 2023 and 24, and then should have pretty good net income due to some major depreciation that's going to come off, specifically from the 1993 wastewater sewer plant renovations that could be close to $100,000 a year. So that's going to make those funds a lot better when that comes off. For the storm, sewer, and water increase, the net income would not be as great, would be steady starting in 22. So what kind of impact does that have on the rates? So our estimate for the rates, and that would be this, if you want to put up this one.
1 second, let's switch over. Flip page.
So you have another spreadsheet that says on the top water, storm sewer, and sanitary rate increases. If you can, and it's up on the screen here, but if you want to move to that, tried to break down kind of by family size and by commercial. The commercial might be on another spreadsheet that you have there, but basically, if you look at the base rate per thousand or the per thousand gallon rate for sanitary sewer with the 13% increase, the rates go from 445 to 503. For commercial, for example, if you had a 1.5 inch line, your rates per thousand would go from 57.68 a month to 65.18, and then so on, as you can see on that chart. For residential, we look at rates, and we also have that base charge in there. Rates going with a 13% increase from $25.99 to $29.37 per month, or annually from $312 to $350. Now, by our kind of math here, it's easier, I think, to spread these costs out over these utility funds, or that's their portion of the cost. It's not anything more than that. So it's the water being run up Red Wing, it's the water extension, looping and sewer looping, and the water and sewer that's going into the business park. So these are just the funds portions of the projects. Just to be clear on that. The biggest increase comes with the stormwater fund. And if you look there, that's a little simpler, but that's going to go for residential from 403 to 564 a month. So really it's not a real big, when you look at it in a dollars per month standpoint. For non-residential, it goes from 8 to 11. And for multifamily, it goes from 281. For water, there'd be a 20% increase. The rates would go per 1,000 gallons from 350 to 420, and then for a 1 inch line, again, that'd be commercial, would go from 1363 to 1636. So if you look at the residential, the total bill, we tried to take some typical water usages starting at about 1,400 gallons. The rates would go from 1170 to 1404. For a family of 4, I'll just jump down to that, they would go from 2605 to 3126. The annual bill for family of 4 would go from 313 to 375. So anyway, as we look at this, I think this is a good way to cover these costs, and we're, from an auditing standpoint, taking everything from the fund it should be anyway by doing this. And you look at the amount that these projects are costing the city, we're talking a bond sale of $5 million. And so really the only right now projected levy increase is for part of the business park project. That's it. So, and that's $40,000 and maybe would start in 2 years, depending on which structure it. So anyway, that's kind of what we thought would be the best way to approach this, the best way to spread it out, and I think the best way for these funds, to pay their portion of the cost of these projects. So with that, I don't know if there's any questions on any of that.
So current residents are going to be paying for a project that is into the future. So the people who may be here several years from now will only partially have to pay for it with assessments.
Right. Well, the people in the affected area pay, and right, the other revenue source is the assessments for Red Wing, that's correct. And that's still the same as what we talked about last fall and last summer. I mean, the numbers of that haven't changed, but right. What we're trying to do, and I think what most cities are trying to do with projects like this, is spread the cost out over different sources, so it's not all one huge, impact to levy.
Yes,
You're trying to, and it's sometimes hard to do this, but we're in a position because of debt retirement, because of depreciation coming off, that we can do it. And I think it actually works pretty well if you look at what the actual increases are and the amount of, improvement that's going on right now with these projects.
Yep, okay. So if someone comes in and asks why I should be paying for the business park when it's not even built yet, you will have an explanation.
Yeah, they won't pay till 21, and hopefully by 21 it will be built. So hopefully that won't come into play.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
So it looks like it'll work.
Well, it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be, I'll tell you. Even if the levy was higher for the business park, I think there's ways we would make it work, but I just think this makes it a lot easier to deal with. And everything is, the rate is the same, it's a flat amount instead of trying to kind of phase it in. So I like that part better about this too.
Well, and I think it's important to remember too, that it's just not the business park, but we're doing
No, that's half of it.
there, sewer and water wise, and controlling runoff water for that part of the city that is going to be a benefit regardless of what happens.
Exactly. Plus the looping is going to help.
Yeah, half of the business park number is a major project cost. So really, we would do that regardless of this business park. It would only be maybe what, 700, 600,000, but half of the cost of the business park financing is, a major capital project the city's doing, like a road project. So, right. So when you talk about the rates going up, a good chunk of that is because of that sewer and water extension project. A lot less of it is because of the business park. And that's another reason I like being able to use these funds to pay for it versus levying.
And how soon do the utility rates go up?
Next year, 21. Like
Okay, so they're not paying next month for,
no.
okay.
Correct. So I don't know if there's any other questions on that.
Mark, this is Joe. If I'm doing the math right, for a family of 4, when you add the sewer, water, and storm sewer all together, based on the projections here, the increase would be about $12 a month.
Yep.
That would cover all the utilities.
Yep.
A lot of dollars.
Yeah. Particularly when you're trying to feed yourself or you don't have a job.
Yeah.
But
Any other questions on that part of it?
other than refiguring the whole thing, which seems ridiculous, it's not going to happen until next year, right?
Right, exactly.
So
And
by that time, maybe things will have cleared up enough so that this won't be such a big hit.
yeah, and we can, we'll have the final numbers next year and maybe this can be tweaked a little bit. They're just based on figures right now, but obviously that will change as we get the final project, bids in. And
Yeah.
everything flushes out, and maybe, who knows, maybe there will be more revenue that comes into water, and maybe that increase won't be so high for any of the funds. But these are the best projections we can put right now together. So,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
yep. Okay. So I guess if there's no other questions, Derek, then if you want to talk about the change order.
Sure, yeah.
Mark, just real quick before we leave this, and these are the utility costs, the numbers for the rates you're showing right now are based on existing, the existing system, right?
Yep.
In other words, if you are successful in selling any of those lots in the business park and you get a new, industrial user, their water usage is going to lower these numbers because you'll have more, more usage in the system then, more volume going out.
Yeah, and to a lesser extent, we have, 4 or 5 homes so far going in. So, I mean, that's all going to contribute to this too.
Right. So every little increase in that usage will lower the rates correspondingly a little bit.
Yes.
So.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so with that, I believe it was yesterday afternoon, Mark had sent out to the group here this letter and a request for a change order on the Red Wing Avenue project here that's starting up. And I think maybe before I dive into this, I'll just kind of recap what's been going on with this. It was last Thursday, am I remembering that correctly, when we had our pre-construction meeting?
Yep.
Held our pre-construction meeting with Wenzel Construction, several people here at the city, and then also several utility companies that will also be coordinating with the overall project team here to get some utilities out of the way. I guess we won't go into full details on everything that was discussed unless there's something in particular that someone wants to know. But just wanted to update everyone that did have a really good conversation with Wenzel. Really weren't any major concerns that came out of that meeting. Yeah, looking forward to a good project with them. I've heard very good things about Wenzel Construction with the people that I have spoken with that have done projects with them before. So we're expecting a good project. So with that, what's included in the packet here today is a request for a change order. This isn't a change order that would affect the overall project cost, but more so what we're doing is just kind of changing some of the terms and the technical specifications to allow the contractor to make this contract work with their work plan. And everything in here seems reasonable, at least from our standpoint here right now, but we want to get your feedback. So what I will do here is I'm going to switch to the last page, this change order, which is the project area. The first thing—
I'm not sure I have the change order in front of me.
I'll
Is that any
Richard, that
different
was,
email or, pardon?
Richard, you would have gotten that in an email from Mark yesterday.
yeah.
Okay, well, let me go and check it out.
Okay. Well, otherwise, I can kind of walk you through what's included with it. Mark's
If you would.
going to try to resend it to you here right now. There's basically two items included in this. The first of which is changing some of the technical specifications for the water main to allow the contractor to install the water main within the alley portion of the project. So that's that alternate 2 alley. It's just one block of alley replacement between Forest Street and Red Wing Avenue. What we had previously required in the contract was basically just an allowance for certain types of materials to allow them to install that water main using traditional open cut, open trench construction methods. What the contractor has requested is if they can install that water main using trenchless methods, or is what's known as directional drilling. So basically they bore that new water main in below ground, and they don't have to, completely dig up the entire surface. Their reasoning for wanting to do this is because they think that they can do this quicker and have less impact to some surrounding utilities. Namely, there's a gas main that runs through the alley that was going to be a significant challenge for them to work around. If we make this change, it basically allows them a couple of different material changes that will allow them to, bore in this main. I wouldn't look at this as any, you're not getting any lesser of a product or anything like that. It's just allowing the contractor to change their construction methods a bit through this area.
And there was no change in
Okay.
cost.
No change in cost with this. Yep. It's basically just allowing
Have-
them method of construction.
Have they taken in any bore samples, finding out that they might run into, where are they going to be, at least 8 feet in the ground? Hitting rock or anything that they're aware of?
Well, the contractor hasn't. During the design process, we advanced several borings. I believe we had about 8 of them throughout the total project area, and we did not encounter any rock at all. So hopefully that continues on here, and we don't run into any surprises. Sometimes that happens. Those borings are only at the locations where you actually take the boring. So sometimes you run into unexpected rock, but I'm not expecting it here at this point based on what they have encountered to date.
Yeah. That happened on First Street.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
Yeah.
Any other questions with the water main?
No.
Nope.
Okay. So the second change that's included with this change order is basically a revision to some of the work phasing requirements associated with this project. The image that's up on the screen here right now, you might notice this from previous discussions. I'll just kind of review this. What we have is that the north end of the project, which is on the right-hand side of the screen, the area north of 5th Street is what we're calling phase 1, or phase 1A and 1. For this area, the contractor has to start work within this area and continue on with their utility work until they're done. Once their utility work within phase 1 is done, then those utility crews move on to phase 2A. In the meantime, there'll be some cleanup work going on in phase 1B to allow basically their surface crews to come in and install aggregate base within the road and basically make this area within phase 1 passable to traffic again. This phase 2A was intended as a transition phase. That would basically encourage the contractor and allow the contractor to keep their utility crews on site so they don't have to wait for the surface work to finish up before they continue on with their utility work. What the contractor is asking for is, in the original contract, we had allowed them this area between 6th Street and 5th Street. They could only work in that area while they were finishing up this. They're asking for another half a block to work with their utility crews early on here. The reason why they're asking for some additional room is towards the southern end of this revised phase 2 area, we're getting into some pretty deep sanitary sewer on the order of 25-ish feet in that area. What they're hoping to understand with that is if they can get into that, just the start to that deep segment of sanitary sewer, they can understand what they are going to need to do for the remainder of the project to address groundwater. Groundwater is I would call it a major concern when you're that deep in the ground. From the contractor's perspective, they want to understand what those challenges are so that they can plan for them early. So that's the biggest reason why they wanted some additional room here. The only other thing that we're really changing with this is initially when we had set up this phasing requirement, we said that, okay, Mr. Contractor, you can only remove the existing pavement within phase 1B, during this initial phase of work, that's starting up here next week. They cannot do anything within phase 2A or 2B further to the south until later on. What they are requesting is if they can remove the bituminous pavement surface within this revised phase 2A area initially here, which basically saves them a mobilization cost for the equipment that they use to reclaim the pavement surface. In terms of what the actual difference is to the city and to the residents in this area, it seems like a reasonable request. When they come through and actually reclaim this pavement, basically what will be left in this area for a couple of months a little bit earlier will be a mixture of ground up asphalt and aggregate base below there. Generally speaking, that material is pretty resilient and probably fairly similar to the existing pavement surface that's out there right now, asphalt surface. So there will be some additional maintenance that the contractor will have to do. They'll have to come in and grade the surface if it gets wet, or provide dust control if it's especially dry and there's a lot of people that want to drive on that surface, that type of thing. But that's basically the last thing that we'd be allowing with this change order, is allow them to remove a little bit more of that pavement surface with some additional provisions built in there to make sure that the roadway is still open to traffic to the extent possible for residents living in that area while they're not working.
It'll probably end up being smoother.
It's a good chance.
Yeah. I've got a question.
Sure.
When you're saying they're down there 25, 30 feet now, there's going to be groundwater. That's, I think, what you're talking about coming in seepage wise.
Yes.
So they're going to have pumps in there to lower that level down so they can work. What have they figured out as to where they're going to go with that excess water?
Well, generally what they'll do with any of that groundwater is if there is some storm sewer nearby that they can pump to, then they will do that. Otherwise, okay, that water just drains off just like any, regular rain runoff would leave the site.
Yeah, more than likely it'd run to the north.
Yes.
Okay.
And that whole groundwater concern, there was some groundwater that did show up in the soil borings that we completed. The deep soil boring that we did, that was 35 feet deep, showed groundwater right at about the depth that sewer was going in. Now, the thing that comes along with those borings is That boring only tells you what the groundwater level is at that specific location and at that specific time.
Yeah,
The contractor, that's the reason why he wants to revise this phase 2A area a little bit so that he can actually see for himself, okay, what am I going to be working with and what do I need to bring out on site here for pumps and, dewatering systems, that type of thing, so we can get this project in the ground.
yeah. It'll all be in piping anyway down to the storm sewer, so it won't be literally running down the street.
They'll
Yeah.
be able
No,
to do that.
that's the normal way of doing it, yeah.
There might be some times when they need to direct some of it overland, but we'll try to minimize that. They still need to meet their erosion control requirements for the project.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is Joe. We've got new storm sewer that we'll be building at the intersection of Red Wing and 5th Street.
Mhm.
So right at that south end of phase 1.
Yep.
So, that storm sewer would be available for them to pump water into out of phase 2, if that's convenient for them to do that.
That sounds like a little short distance to go. They wouldn't have to lay too much pipe out.
Yeah, it's just the one block they'd have to go.
Yeah, yeah,
So that might be a good option for them. That storm sewer in phase 1 will be in because they've got to finish the phase 1 work before they can start phase 2. So
Yeah.
we know that storm sewer will be there.
yeah. Find out if it leaks, huh?
I guess the only thing that I didn't cover in here is for this transition phase, we were allowing a time period of 2 weeks or 14 days for them to have utility crews working in phase 2A while their surface crew was finishing up with phase 1. This change order is actually revising that time period and increasing that allowable time up to 20 days. I guess justification for that just seems to be, since there's a little bit more area for them to transition in here, it seemed appropriate to give them a little bit more time. Realistically, to be completely honest with you, a lot of times these conversations, these requests that come in from contractors on these types of projects happen at the absolute last minute when there's no time. Basically, they're not giving the city a choice. It seems that Wenzel is really planning ahead here. So that's the other reason why I thought it might be appropriate to, accommodate their request and give them a little bit more time, because they seem to be planning ahead here. And that's a good thing.
So Mark, is this change order, is this something we vote on tonight, or we just approve it, or how does that work?
Yeah, vote on tonight. That's what Derek and Joe are asking for. Yeah, it'll be considered by council tonight. That's why we
Okay.
moved the agenda to show that. So,
We need a motion or what?
yeah,
Yeah, we'll have to do that. Mark, do you want me to step in on that for the change order?
yeah, you can. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, there's, we'll put it this way, there's a motion been made for a change order number 1. Is that correct now? And we're all aware of what it is. So is there a motion on, is there, somebody want to make a motion for the change order, yea or nay?
So move.
Yeah. John.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion's been made and second to approve of the change order. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, the way it sounds there, the ayes win, so change order should come in then.
Thank you.
I guess that's all we have.
All right.
We need to make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, so we'll need a motion to adjourn if there's no other questions or anything related to the change order.
Okay, well, is there a motion
I make a
on that?
motion that we adjourn.
Okay, we'll second that. Okay, that's fine. Then we'll put it this way, all in favor of adjournment, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Aye, okay, ayes win. So, meeting is over with at 17:30 hours.